We bring in CBS Sports NBA analyst John Gonzalez with more on the Knicks hiring. And Brown was the only coaching candidate to interview for the Knicks job multiple times after there were other failed attempts at other options this offseason. But how much conviction do you think went into this decision?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have to rush here, Kiana, right? I mean, they were the only game in town, so I think that that's part of the reason why they decided to ask Jason Kidd and Ime Udoka and Chris Finch and every other coach who was already gainfully employed whether or not they wanted this gig. But ultimately, I think they landed on a good fit for them, right? I mean, as you mentioned, he has Mike Brown 4 championships as an assistant under Kerr and Pop. Back in 2018, Steve Kerr had health issues, and Brown stepped in, and they didn't miss a beat, and they went on to win another championship. He generally emphasizes defense, but even 2 years ago, the Kings had the best offense in the NBA, so he can coach at both ends of the floor, and he generally tends to be pretty well liked by his players, you know, notwithstanding whatever happened with that little sort of mini drama at the end of his tenure with the Aaron Fox. I think he's pretty popular with his players, but ultimately the whole assignment here, Kiana, is just don't be Tibbs. I love Tibbs. Everybody loves Tibbs, but Tibbs is very stuck in his ways. We all know how enamored he is with just playing his first starting 5 and running them into the ground and really not utilizing his bench. Well, in the offseason, while they were trying to identify their head coach, Leon Rose, the president of basketball operations for the Knicks, went out and got Jordan Clarkson and went out and got Gershon Yabusele, and he adds them to a bench of Deuce McBride and Mitchell Robinson. So now you're legitimately 9 deep, and hey, Mike Brown will use all 9 of his guys, and we'll see where that gets the Knicks. But ultimately, good fit for both sides here.
Yeah, I've heard many people call Mike Brown maybe a player's coach outside of the incident that you were referring to. So very different maybe type of style that we might see from Mike Brown compared to Tom Thibodeau. But the Knicks are coming off their best season in, well, a quarter of a century, 25 years. But just how much pressure is there on this team just going into next season now, considering what they were able to do this last season? Now you have a new head coach. You have the talent. You have a guy like Jalen Brunson as your one. You have so many assets. How much pressure is there now?
Yeah, I think there's a fair amount, right? Because the East is pretty up for grabs. I mean, you had the Cavs that were the #1 team in the Eastern Conference all season long. They had the #1 offense, but then they crash out in the second round. They're beatable, right? The Boston Celtics, everybody thought, hey, dynasty coming off of last year, right? A year on, Jason Tatum blows out his Achilles. They look at their tax bill, and they decide $500 million for this team isn't going to work out. We got to move on from Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. They're going to have a gap year. You know, there's some teams that I really like in the Eastern Conference. I think that the Magic have added with Desmond Bane, and you have the Atlanta Hawks, who I think did just wonders this offseason. But ultimately, you're going to look around at the East and go, there's really 2 teams that should be at the top of the pecking order, the Cavs and now the New York Knicks. They made their first Eastern Conference Finals in 25 years. Didn't work out with Tibbs. They improved every year under him, but they ultimately realized that, hey, we're going to have to change up the head coach here. But now there's really no more excuses, no more levers to pull, because you do have a really talented team. You have 2 guys who made All-NBA last year in Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns. You have 2 incredible wing defenders in OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, right? You've got that bolstered bench that we discussed. There really aren't any excuses. If you're the Knicks, it's finals or bust now. You want to be Eastern Conference champions. You want to get back to the finals for the first time in forever. And then from there, you could call it a successful season. I think anything short of that is probably an unsuccessful season. So I would say, yeah, that would probably signify some pretty significant pressure for them.
Yeah, finals or bust, because I was going to go into this asking you, we know what the expectations are now on the Knicks, considering we're talking about, you just mentioned the talent that they have, but now where do they stack up in the East realistically in your mind? Outside of just looking at what their pressure is going into the year, how do they stack up?
Yeah, if we're going to put it in tiers, I think they're in that first tier with the Cleveland Cavaliers. They just traded for Lonzo Ball. I really like that move for them. They were really good last year. They figured out how to work Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland together at the same time. That had previously been something that just didn't work. Now it does. Also, similarly, Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, that front court, that offense that Kenny Atkinson put together is fantastic. So I'd put the Knicks right there with them as the #1 contenders in the Eastern Conference. But as I mentioned, the East is super up for grabs. It's maybe going to be the most unpredictable Eastern Conference in quite some time, because after those 2, you've got this grab bag of teams in the East that, like, who knows what they're going to do. I like the Magic. They've got an excellent defense. They just traded for Desmond Bane, but traditionally they've been pretty offensively limited. We'll see whether or not Desmond Bane can raise their level. The Pistons last year, Pistons almost unseated the Knicks in the first round, but they didn't, right? And now they lost some pieces. They moved some pieces around. Dennis Schroeder is gone, and some other guys. They did bring in Karis LeVert, and we'll see what they are as they get Jaden Ivey back. I love what the Hawks have done. The Hawks were fantastic this offseason. That new front office with Ansi Saleh, and they've just like completely revamped it with Kristaps Porzingis, and they bring in Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Luke Kennard, but also they're the Hawks, Kiana. So like, how much faith do you really have in Atlanta? I want to see it before I believe it. But yeah, all these other teams that are sort of swirling around, they could potentially play spoiler. Giannis, yes, he's now paired with Miles Turner, but I'm not buying the Bucks at all. That's going to be a blow it up situation. So if you're the Knicks, I think you look at all of that and go, there's some teams that could potentially be problematic, but we should be way better than all of them, except for the Cavs. They should be right there.
Yeah, maybe like a 1A, 1B, just considering these are two teams that maybe have been, I guess, they've been built already. It's kind of a little bit of that tried and true, I guess is the way I can put it, compared to some teams that have made plenty of moves and it's still yet to be determined. I know you mentioned Orlando. That's a team that I have circled. The Hawks, hey, we don't know how that might play out, but nonetheless, Knicks wide open. A lot of those injuries this postseason making things easy for them. John Gonzalez bringing the best as always. Well, according to FanDuel, Knicks have the second shortest odds to win the East, plus 80 odds. The Cavs, though, still leading the charge, looking to pick up where they left off this last season as the East's best team. But big question, though, can they get out of the second round?